So we've shown you a few things that you can take apart and salvage and get neat little bits from, but there's a lot of other things that we didn't show you on the show, so we want to take a minute to talk about those. So let's say you want to do a project and you need a motor. So let's say we've got like some little motors here that you can get from anything with a disk drive, so CD drive, DVD, Blu-ray players. You can also get them from like paper shredders or sometimes electronic kids toys. But if you want a bigger motor, you can get one from like some kitchen appliances, so maybe like a blender or a food processor, or weren't you saying a vacuum cleaner?
Yeah, there's something to think about. So with these disc motors, if you look at them, they have multiple lines going to them. So these are going to be 3-phase DC motors, actually kind of like how a quadcopter motor works.
Okay.
So it's going to take a little bit more effort to get these to spin, but you will have more control over the speed. So basically, if you see a lot of transistors under it, if you see 3 of something, that means it's going to be a 3-phase DC motor.
So here's one that got pulled out of a disk drive. It's got a nice little worm gear on there. That can be really useful.
Yeah, and if you look at this, there's 4 connections. Plus, we know this is used to accurately move back the head. So this is going to be a stepper motor. The worm gear also gives you a very high gear reduction as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, that could be useful for something.
Yeah.
And then these are just basically bog standard DC motors. You can tell there's usually a black and red wire that just screams DC voltage. So yeah, those are pretty obvious to use.
Well, and anything that has a motor, a lot of times there's, pulleys of various sizes. So a lot of people don't have a 3D printer at home, so sometimes you can get pulleys and gears out of scrapped electronics.
A pulley may be rotted in an older piece of electronics, but if it's intact, go for it.
Yeah.
But they can rot. I mean, usually that's what will fail. If you find like a 30-year-old VCR, or I'm sorry, a broken belt, it's probably going to be your biggest problem. So yeah, a lot of times you can find gears and pulleys, but just make sure the belts are still in one piece because they can often dry out and break and cause old electronics to fail.
And you can also get some precision rods. Those are nice.
And you can use them as a target on your screen to position where to set things.
Yeah, I've gotten those out of like printers and paper shredders, paper folders, and then those little ones are out of disk drives.
Did you see that sweet 8mm rod I got out of my typewriter?
No, I didn't.
Oh, well, the 8mm is like kind of the standard, for making 3D printers. So
is it?
Yeah, score. So you got a variable capacitor here. So that was probably from a radio, I assume.
Probably.
And then these are DVD read heads, you said?
Yeah, so there's a lot of things that you can get out of a disk drive. Just in here, I've taken these apart before, and there's an actual laser in here. There's some optics. There's a bunch of little mirrors. I think there's at least 3 in here, and there's even 2 little neodymium magnets.
Because when this thing boots up,
Neodymium? Is it neodymium? Neodymium magnets.
I am Neo. These will actually go in. They'll contract in and out. When you load the disk, it's like so there's a motor for all of that.
Yeah.
Then if you can scrap a Blu-ray, or actually probably better, if you can find an HD DVD player, remember Blu-ray's competitor? It also used a blue laser diode, and those have more power. So do you ever see that video of the guy who made the watch laser that could pop balloons?
No.
It was really cool. It was like James Bond. He was popping balloons. Anyway, that was a Blu-ray laser.
Nice.
What else do we have here, Karen?
So say you want a heating element for a project. Maybe you need a hot wire cutter for foam.
That'd be
or
cool.
If you want to make a little heater to keep your coffee or tea warm and you want to put a timer on it or something. Or if you want to make a whole reflow oven. There's a bunch of different appliances that come with heating elements.
We saw a lot of toaster ovens at the thrift store. There's probably at least 4 of them there.
Oh yeah, and there was a ton of toasters too. So yeah, you can also get nichrome wire, which is used to, you put voltage to it and heat goes through it, and it's really good for generating heat. You can get those out of toasters, toaster ovens, coffee makers, hot air popcorn poppers. Can you think of anything else?
Well, there's lots of things that create
dishwashers, clothes
Something
dryers.
else to think about though, if you are scrapping some sort of heating device, it's also going to have a large relay control, because if you set your oven to 300 degrees, it doesn't have a variable control 300 degrees. No, It turns the element on and off at a certain rate to achieve 300 degrees. So whatever controls that high power element is also going to be in there. So if you have anything remotely modern, like an oven with buttons on it, it's not only going to have the heating elements, but the electronics to control those high power elements.
So if you want to make your cat like an auto watering fountain thing, you can get some water pumps out of dishwashers or washing machines.
How many scrap dishwashers do you come across?
People put them on like Craigslist and on the side of the road fairly often. Craigslist, it's your friend for scrappers. You know what else is really useful? Displays. You can get displays everywhere.
You mean computer monitors?
Computer monitors or like 7-segment displays or little LCD displays.
Yeah, the 7-segment displays would be a lot easier to reuse than an LCD from a monitor, which we've talked about before. You know, that's the holy grail, is reusing laptop screens, but everything is so locked into the laptop it's built into, it's kind of hard to reuse. But remember the giant Game Boy we made? That was just a crappy LCD screen that was like 10 years old. Nobody would want it, you know, like a little lost kitten. But it was perfect for the Game Boy project. So even though it wouldn't have any utility, you know, for actual workstation, it's great for a project like that.
You can also reuse old monitors, CRT or else other kind, to make a MAME cabinet. A lot of people like to make those old retro video game cabinets. And the older monitors sometimes can be better because you get a more like visual resolution, like the look that you would get with like the older ones, as opposed to like, have you ever played like an old video game on a new TV? It looks really weird.
Well, there's a reason for that. It's because the old video games only worked at half of the fields of a normal interlace NTSC display. All right, so if you had a 60 fields per second NTSC display, that means you had your odd and your even fields interlaced like this, right? And it was 30 fields a second, or a total of 60 fields a second, because there's even and odd fields, right? So they're like this. And so that's what gets you your 480 vertical lines of resolution. And that's why old, you know, it would kind of flicker.
So that's how video is 30 frames per second, but there's 2 fields per interlaced?
Yeah, so technically,
60.
Technically a television broadcast is 60 frames a second, but they couldn't transmit 480 lines 60 times a second, so they transmit 240 lines 30 times a second and alternate them to make it look like a higher resolution and a higher frame rate. But what the old video game consoles did is they did not use interlacing up until, I think, the PlayStation 1. They only would render 1 field, right? So when you looked at like a Sega Genesis game or a Nintendo game, you wouldn't see any interlacing or flicker because they didn't use it.
Oh.
So when it's put onto a modern television, it's not even standard def, it's half a standard def. It's like 320 by 240. So a modern television will actually just double that up and make it look even blockier or blurrier. Something else I noticed talking about NTSC is you have a 3.579545 crystal here.
Yes.
And you know what that is? That is the NTSC color burst frequency. Because NTSC could only change color 160 times per line. Which is why if you had a DV camera back in the mid-2000s, they were really terrible at chroma key. Because like if you were standing in front of a chroma key, the color can only change every 4 pixels, which made the edges bad. So her hair and the green screen might get mucked up, and that's why you'd have big crappy blocks. So I'm kind of a NTSC geek.
It's okay. Though our European friends might be like, pal, 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 pal.
That's true.
So some places where you can get good displays, DVD players, Blu-ray players, CD players, alarm clocks, old microwaves maybe.
Yeah, it's too bad we didn't find a portable DVD player at the thrift store. That would have had a lot of cool parts inside of it.
Yeah. So we've already talked about some other like common parts that are that you can find in electronics, but you can also find LEDs. If you want to be really cheap and not have to buy any components, you can get capacitors, resistors, transistors, transformers, ribbon cable, heat sinks, buttons and switches. You can get all those things from old circuit boards, from old computers or old electronics.
Oh, I love to get the old floppy drive or hard drive cable out of computers and use it for wiring. I mean, you've probably seen that on the show. I'm sure I have something within arm's reach.
Yeah.
Yep.
If you saw our super solder episode.
Oh, I use this all the time. This is 28 gauge wire. So this is probably from a spool, but
So just remove a strand and.
Yeah, but you can get tons of this out of an old computer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's my favorite thing to get out of computers. Actually, is that they don't give wire away. So if you can find it, that's great.
So other things that you can salvage from regular everyday household electronics are speakers and buzzers. If you ever need to make noise in your projects, you can get speakers. Speakers also have cool magnets on them, so if you can find a way to pry that off, you can reuse the magnets, because who doesn't love magnets? And then, yeah, there's all kinds of little buzzers you can get. Go beep, beep. If you want to annoy your sibling or neighbor that does something stupid, steals your mail, or
make a pill reminder box like an upcoming episode. So could we use one of these for that?
Scare your pets or something.
We have to make sure that the frequency is such that an old person can hear it.
Yes. And as we were showing in our teardowns, there's always lots of little screws that you can use. So there have been quite a few times where I lost a screw to something that I had taken apart to fix and tried to put it back together, and the screw just like went wherever it went into the abyss. And I was like, oh no, what am I gonna do? Oh, it's a good thing I held on to all of these tiny screws from all of these things that I salvaged, and I was able to find a replacement screw. So whether you're making something from scratch or you just need a replacement, screws are also really good to hang around. So another piece of electronics that I have found to be really cool to take apart and salvage is those old projection TVs, because they have 3 optics in them that are like this big that could be used for some really cool stuff. There's also a really big mirror in it. You could just like frame it and use it as like a mirror on your wall. It's really big.
Are you talking like DLP TVs or older than that?
No, like the DLPs.
Oh,
and then
does that mean you're gonna try to scrap my Sony in the break room?
No, not unless it dies.
It'll never die.
But no, so the really fun thing to get out of old DLP TVs is the screen is actually a giant Fresnel lens. Check out Fresnel, like you should Google Fresnel because Fresnels are awesome. Basically, instead of having the big curve, they slice it like this and they adjust each layer to have still the angle of the curve, but it makes it so that they can flatten it. So it's a nice skinny lens that still has the magnification of a lens that was really deep.
Oh, I didn't know that's how it worked.
Yeah, and so Fresnel, it's Fresnel. They use them a lot in theater lights. But what's really cool is because it's so big, if you build a frame for it and you put it out in the sun, you can like melt concrete.
Concrete?
Well, I don't know about concrete, but you can melt
leaves.
Lots of things. You can melt pennies in like seconds. The King of Random made a solar scorcher.
Oh, maybe we should scrap that old Sony TV. You could probably make a projector out of it too, because
you could.
The DLP, there's, I think the newer ones have RGB combined, but there would be, DLP is a digital light projector, and it has very small mirrors that tilt electrically to create the pixels with the brightness. So they basically bounce the colored lights off of those, and then they recombine them into an image.
That's why there's 3 big. That's why there's 3 big optics, because there's RGB.
Yeah, back when I got that TV, like DLP was the way to go, because a flat panel was astronomically expensive.
Yeah. So there's a lot of electronic kids toys that have motors and buttons and switches and battery packs and cool things like that, gears, wheels. That would be good for various projects.
Is that where this came from?
I'm not sure where that came from.
It has 4 IR emitters, but no detectors. I wonder what this was.
Maybe that was from some sort of remote control.
It looks like if a snowman was a robot. I am Robo Snowman.
Kind of looks a little like Wall-E, but green, or like E.T.
Well, but imagine if there was like snow around it. You know, it's like the Snow Terminator.
So once you have all of your circuit boards, how do you get the components off? There are multiple desoldering methods.
Yes, we have desoldering irons here. Felix has a really nice Haco pump he uses. You can use solder wick to pull the solder away. I mean, sometimes that's enough to get the part off. And if it's a surface mount part, you can really just do it with an iron. You just heat up both sides of the part and then stick a little X-Acto underneath and whoop, lift it off. Just take your time and make sure you don't damage anything.
Yep, sometimes you can use a heat gun if you get it focused enough on the solder. You can use that to just do like a huge area, and then use tools like tweezers or needle nose pliers to kind of poke them out. Or you can put them in a toaster oven, reflow oven, or even just your regular oven. If you've got like a baking sheet, you can put it on there. Just be very careful to the degree that you heat it to, and then you can just kind of shake them all out. Be careful to always wear protection whenever you're taking these things apart, because solder can turn liquid and flick. So safety glasses and protective gloves are a good idea.
You know, I would say if it's anything remotely old, probably don't use your cooking stove.
Yes.
Rojas, or basically trying to get as much lead as possible out of objects, didn't really kick in until like the mid 2000s. So if you go back into like the 90s, or certainly earlier than the 90s, there's going to be lead. So probably don't use your Thanksgiving turkey oven cooker. Just get a cheap $5 thrift store toaster oven.
Yeah.
Who cares if there's lead in that? Yeah. Unless you get really drunk, you're like, I need some house. Oh, here we go. And then you become the lead man.
Another component of salvaging and being a scrapper is staying organized, because if you can't find it, you're not going to use it. So there's a lot of inexpensive ways or even free ways to sort all your parts. You can use old tubs from things that you've eaten, clean them out nice and well. If it's got a nice screw lid, you can keep bigger parts like this. I had a bunch of motors in here and gears and things like that. You can buy these bins fairly cheaply at your local hardware store. You can use mason jars or anything else. I love these. You can get them for a couple bucks either in the bead section, like of your craft store, or fishing tackle. A lot of times they're only like $2-3 each.
Yeah, Menards and Home Depot have these pretty cheap.
Yeah.
You know, a trick my dad used to do is he would take Gerber baby food jars and he would nail the lids underneath a shelf
Yeah,
and then screw the jar up into it.
Yep.
So
It's
if
a
you
good
have
method.
kids, although they probably don't actually have glass jars anymore.
No, they do.
They do? Really?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can still get them, because when I did like a project last summer where I was like, hey guys, I need some baby food jars. We were making tiny snow globes. So another good thing to use is mailing envelopes, because you can put all of your tiny components in there, like resistors or capacitors, and it's really easy to just write the label on there, and they're really easy to sort, so you could sort them by lowest to highest in resistance if you want.
Something I like to do when I use bins like this is I usually put the part name on twice. Because if you put it on the lid and then you open it up, you're like, what is everything?
Yep.
So it's usually better to put it in here or both.
Yep. It is always a good idea to label everything, because even if everything is sorted, if it's not labeled and you can't see it at a glance, you're probably not going to take the time to use it.
I mean, yeah, well, even when it is like your pile of capacitors here, I mean, clearly they're capacitors, but I would, if
They're
it was,
all jumbled.
yeah, I would sort them. I would, and even it, maybe not too far, maybe it's like over 1,000, 110, 4.5,
Right.
1. At least get them into like ranges of values so you can at least home in on it faster. Anything to ensure that you will maybe reuse it. Oh, you have a resistor array. That's pretty cool. I wonder where you got that. Oh, a bunch of headphone jacks.
So once you've gotten all of your electronics salvaged and you've taken all of the pieces out of it, you've got everything off the circuit boards you want, it's best to recycle everything. So if you sort everything into metal, plastic, and circuit boards, there's usually a place in your town or maybe a town nearby that will recycle old computers or electronics or appliances. And a lot of times you can take the metal, plastic, and circuit boards and they can recycle all of those. So try not to throw the stuff away when you're done.
Well, I think one nice tip is if you do, like let's say you have an old crappy computer, you get it from a bank or something, you rip out all the cool components and then you have a steel shell and it's just steel. So if you put that in your normal recycling, they'll be like, oh, it's a piece of steel. They know what to do with it. Computer, they don't know what to do with it. So even if you don't have a local computer recycling place a block away like we do, just by breaking things down into their basic components, it makes a better chance of whoever you have for recycling that they can actually sort it out and use it.
So those are a bunch of examples of appliances and things that you can crack open and things you can reuse, but we just covered a few. There are a lot more. So if you're ever going to build something, first maybe think about where you could scrap that from rather than trying to buy it new if you have the time.